everybody. What a beginning. I am your host, Wendy Stuart, and welcome to TriVersity Talk. And tonight, I'm very excited about tonight's show. Tonight's show is going to be about HIV, and we're going to talk about things that you don't hear about, such as criminalization, stigmatizing, and just really what is going on out there right now. It's the topic that I have brought on people that are very, very involved in this tonight. So it's going to be a great show. With that being said, I'd like you all to meet my co-host tonight, the fabulous Stella D'oro.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Wendy. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you here. It's very funny. Stella D'oro and I met at the Glam Awards in New York, where my podcast, If These Walls Could Talk, was up for the best podcast. And Stella D'oro and I started talking, and she hands me her card. And, we were talking and I'm thinking, oh, she's so lovely. Another really wonderful drag entertainer in New York. And then I get this card that talks about her getting volunteers for HIV trials at Columbia University. And it just goes to show you, you never can judge a book by its cover, because you never know who you're talking to. Right. I mean, the cover sure is pretty, but you know what? I loved I loved finding out the content inside. Now, our other guest tonight, I am very excited to bring on. Tami Haught is the managing director for the Sero Project. And I have Michelle Troxell, who, besides being a registered nurse, a life coach, she is the co-chair of the Positive Woman Network. So welcome and come on in. They're in our green room right now. Here we go. Oh my God, it worked. Modern technology. All four of us are on the screen at the same time. I know, right? I'm thankful for the little things in life. So I want to start with just everyone giving just a brief overview and introduction. Stella, because you're the co-host tonight, a brief overview of a little bit about your background as an entertainer, but a lot about your background in HIV.
Brief. I'm the oldest person here. It's going to be brief. It's going to be a little longer. So I've been around a few years, and I was around when HIV hit. I was around before HIV, and I came as a theater kid to New York, directed, choreographed, taught at a big dance studio, then ended up in business, in publishing, in HBO, in American Lung Association, Channel 13, all these other different things I did. But I wasn't really radicalized until the mid-'80s, until about 85, 86. Now, a lot of you people that are watching this might not know who Susie is, or who these people, Liz Smith is at the New York Post. But she had written a column about how lovely Pat Buckley was, having this big party. And if you don't know Pat Buckley, her husband was the big right-winger, Bill Buckley. And he was espousing tattooing positive signs on the back ends of gay men. And that really upset me. And when I saw her publicizing this party, I got very upset. So being the nice guy that I was, the nice, normal, regular gay guy I was, I wrote a nice little letter to the New York Post. Dear Miss, I really like your column, Miss Smith, and I really love you, and thank you for everything you do for HIV. But you publicize, Pat Buckley's party, and you know what her husband does. And please, understand that we're in a problem. Wow. So I decided, what the hell? I'll CC the gay newspaper. So I CC'd the gay newspaper. Well, then all hell broke loose. They not only published the paper, the letter, they put on the front page a picture of a pig with her head on it. Okay, and put my letter with it. And
there
did this totally radical gay activist. And I wasn't part of anything. And I went, right. You want radical? So that's when I went to ACT UP. But they were a little too radical for me. And I didn't understand it too much. So I went on to the Housing Committee. And so with Gadali Braverman and Kent, this is way before there was a Charles or anybody that's there now making millions of dollars.
And we're back in the 80s with what you're saying, where There were no quote unquote cocktails.
Nothing.
I remember
AZT hadn't even come out in '86.
There was nothing. And I remember the gay men's health crisis at the time setting up, they were small, setting up a table in Fire Island
Right.
to collect money for this disease called GRID.
Right.
GRID is what was it again? It was gay related
immunodeficiency.
Right, immunodeficiency.
Yeah. So wow. I did that on the housing committee, and then my roommate got sick, and he was in the first underground trial. It was illegal, and he had this big, very rich lesbian doctor who was on it, but she couldn't be associated with it. And what happened was he didn't do well on it, and within 2 weeks he was dead. There was no help for him. No one came to visit. No one did it. And so it ended up in the New York Times on the front page. I had to talk with Gina Colada, and it was a traumatic experience. And I got kicked out of ACT UP, and I told them off. There was no emails. There was no Twitter. I had to type everything and Xerox it.
Right.
And Max, whoever from the Times, said, "Congratulations, you're in the same boat as I am with Larry Kramer. He hates both of us." That made me move from ACT UP to Gay Men's Health Crisis, where I was a team leader, a buddy first, and then a team leader. And I did that for a while, and I thought, anyone can do this. If I leave, someone will be interviewed and become a team leader or buddy, and all these other things are happening in the 90s. So I joined AIDS Prevention Activist Program that was in the first half of the 90s with Bill Dobbs and a few other people that were really smart, Stephen Jandel, Urvashi Vaid, all these great people. And it was so radical, it sort of pooped out after APAL was called, AIDS Prevention Action League. About 5 years. And I did the floats. Since I was a theater guy, I did the floats. So and since I was very sexual and I had done all the sex on stage when I was a kid and go-go, so we had this big float with a bed on it and one of those bookstore, little doors. So we had a sign, more unsafe sex happens in the bedroom than in a bookstore. And we had people walking around, making believe having sex.
And I have to say something right there, because I know you're all aware of the banning of the books that are going on all over the country now.
Yeah.
Okay, I would just take that slogan that you just said, and that is definitely a slogan for now. Yeah. So how did you, because I
was on in page 6 with my ass out in front of St. Patrick's Cathedral on that float.
Wow.
And then that sort of petered out. Then they morphed into sex panic when Giuliani came to power and was closing all the safe spaces for gay men to have sex. So we did that. Then I rented a police car and did a paper mache face of Giuliani, put it on the police car. We partnered with rentboy.com, which was brand new back then, to help them give them safer sex information. Even though they were making money, people could die. And Johns or the boys. So we gave them information. So we did this float with them where we would arrest them on their float and put them in the car. So, but the whole committee was absolutely livid. We came in first runner up. They didn't want us to win. Boy would be up there, right? So the police took us off the parade that we got to Christopher Street. They were so offended with the Giuliani stuff. So then all that time I was still doing other volunteer work, and there was a thing in The Voice about giving your blood for free to get a free test, because you had to pay for tests back then if you told them about the sex you had. I didn't mind telling anybody about the sex I had. I was out there. So I went to see these guys in 1994, 2 guys, Carlos and Paul, and I told them about the sex I had, and then we would do that. And that morphed into, hey, would you like to be in an HIV vaccine trial, a real one, with Project Achieve? I said, sure, of course I would. So I was in the first trial ever with VaxGen, which was Don Francis, who was in, and the band played on. Matthew Modine played him.
I know who that is.
Yes. And so I was in that trial for 3 years, and it didn't work, but it was an important thing, and it brought me to the point where they asked me to be on the board of the New York Blood Center.
And that's how that happened for you. I just have a question about that trial. What do you mean it didn't work? What was the trial for?
Efficacy. They were trying out a HIV vaccine. And if it didn't reach 33 to 38%, which is just like in any trial of even COVID, you have to reach a certain amount in order to be efficacious. And it did not. Okay.
Right.
So, because then they'll take people off. So anyway, I came on the board as the old guy back in 2002, I was the old guy, right? Giving them, what I call is I give them perspective. I don't want to give them advice. I give them perspective. But sometimes I'll give them history, of course.
Right.
So then a separate thing happened. I went on vacation, a typical, 1,000 naked gay men in the Poconos. And they had like all these things, the drag contest, and Mr. Leather, Miss Lace, they had a go-go. And I saw the drag contest. And it was really awful, And so I went up to them and I said, well, listen, guys, I can help. I'm a director, choreographer next year if you want some help. And they were so nasty. No, bitch, you have to be in it. They don't have any clothes on. They were still bitches,
They call that bear bitches, Stella.
Yeah. So I teach them. I was still teaching, and I still had access to a studio. So I said, let me put together a number. So since I wrote my master's thesis on Bob Fosse, I put together Cell Block Tango from Chicago using 6 chairs, and I did all the Mary Murderesses. And I didn't have to wear a dress. I just wore panties and like a corset, and somebody gave me a wig. They were going to do my makeup. I had no name. And the day before I left, my roommate had a blind date and said, my roommate doesn't have a name. And this guy who I don't know said, what about Stella D'oro? So I got Stella D'oro, which happens to be my grandmother's name. It's very ethnic. It's very mature. It sort of works. So I said, okay.
It's a cookie.
It's not tattooed on my back in Greek since I'm Greek.
But it's a cookie.
Right, it's a cookie. So I took the name, Stella D'oro. I went out there, and they were really bitches to me. They were really nasty. They expected a pretty boy to win. So I get out there, I do the number in rehearsal, and they're like, shut up. And then when I did it that night, I won. And I won the trip to Mexico and this whole thing. Right, great, wonderful. What am I going to do? I have one dress, one wig. I come back to New York. Before I go back to New York, I'm talking, everyone's, I'm the winner, and everyone meets me and everything. And this one guy came up to me and said, well, I love you. What are you doing next? I said, nothing. I said, I'm done. This is the one thing. And he grabbed me and he said, don't let Stella die.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm like, I connected with him in a certain way. It was so sweet. So I came back to New York, and there was some drag happening. Not a lot. We're talking before RuPaul. And somebody had a sample sale of drag stuff. I bought some stuff. And I realized I'm at the beach with my Walkman, and I'm listening to music, and I'm choreographing in my head all of these divas that I love. The Chers, the Dianas, the Bets, the whatever. And so a new club opened near me called Therapy. So I decided to go there and look around. So I go around all these young kids, I'm really intimidated. I'm already 50-something and not done drag yet, okay? So I'm not somebody who did drag in their 20s or 30s or 40s. So I get there and I say, let me do my number. With one chair. Throw it down, put it back up. So I do it, and I win the $100, right? And so they say, what are you going to do with the money? And so I said, I'm going to give it to Project Achieve. They said, what's that? I said, it's the HIV Vaccine Trial Network. So this young lady, this host said, so you're the queen of vaccine. So I went,
wow.
So I went back to the New York Blood Center and said, do you outreach at night? And they said, well, not really. We try and do things during the day because they're drunk at night and everything. I said, well, what if you had like a card that like you could give to people? And even if they're drunk, they have it for the next day.
Right.
So they liked the idea and they did it. Then they okayed an idea to do a show called It's Vaccinalicious, which we started in 2005. And we're doing our next one, our 17th one. We missed a year. This May. And so we started with this new kid who was host the second year named Peppermint.
Of course.
And so Peppermint was a host. And until 2009, when I was at Channel 13 and got laid off, I quit drag, quit everything. I said, Peppermint, you need to be queen of vaccine. We need a person of color to be queen of vaccine. So I became Queen Mom. So that's what my father says. Listen to your mother, Stella.
Listen. Well, I have to say, you certainly have put a spin on education and something that is extremely valuable.
Now, Peppermint has a bigger audience than I do. Because I'm just here doing it once a week because I was there, I was working, and then I quit. Then Peppermint asked me back to go to Barracuda. I have never left Barracuda. Once a week I go there just to do a number. But Peppermint has a bigger stage. I go there. If I can reach one person a day,
I love that.
Me, you know? And so I have my card for the Instagram and the Facebook. And then what the kids like is I meet them all. I meet them on their way up, on their way down, and I tag them. I take pictures of them every week. I put them on so it gets them a little more, notoriety, and it brands me because on my Facebook page and on my Instagram page it says Queen Mama Vaccine for Columbia University. So that's how I've been doing this for the last 17 years, 18 years.
It's an amazing story, Stella. I love everyone has such varied backgrounds in this group tonight. Tami, I'll move on to you. Because I know you're going to tell me a totally different story than Stella did.
That's true. So I think I was on another call earlier this week when we were comparing our stories to New York, and I figured it out. I've been in New York City for about 36 hours between two different visits. So that is the only connection I have to New York. I am from Iowa. I am a woman living with HIV. I was diagnosed August 23rd, 1993. It was the day before my 25th birthday. So I am thrilled to say that I am 53. And happy for every year, because I never imagined I'd live to see 40, let alone 50 and 53. And for the first 6 years of my diagnosis, I lived in silence. My late husband and I lived in Texas, which is not a welcoming space at all.
You don't need to tell us that. My God. It becomes less welcoming every day.
I was going to say, and they get weirder and crazier every day. And so it wasn't until after he passed away, October 12th, 1996, I was 7 months pregnant. So I had 2 weeks to go to doctor's appointments to make sure I had enough medication. And I moved back home to Iowa. To have my son to die. I came back home to die. And
you found you were HIV positive and pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot imagine the position that you were in terms of not having anyone to talk to.
Yeah, no, we had no one, because we told everyone he had cancer. Because if you have cancer, people care. If people hear you have HIV, they judge, or the first thing they ask is, what did you do, or how did you get it? Not that that's important. It doesn't matter. I had unprotected sex is how I acquired HIV, like a majority of people. But he did not want anyone to know. He was a redneck, homophobic cowboy from Parker County, Texas, which it is like the hub and the central location for that. Wow. And still, when I moved home, our son was born December 21st, 1996. HIV negative, not living with HIV. And for 3 years after he was born, I still lived in silence until he started preschool. And we live in a very rural area, town. I think we looked it up, maybe 2,000 people in this town.
In Iowa.
In Iowa, yes. And so I knew people were going to talk, or I figured when he was in junior high or high school, I would either be very sick or die. So I wanted his classmates' parents to know the facts before we even started school. My worry was that he wouldn't be invited to birthday parties, or worse, people wouldn't come to his birthday party, and how my HIV status would impact him. So when he was in preschool, I contacted the school and said, I want to send a note home to the parents to let them know I'm living with HIV, he's negative, and I'm no danger or no risk to anyone. At first, the school administration, the administrator I met with, did not want to shake my hand. And
by the way, the fact that you did this in the 90s in Iowa, in a small town, is completely blowing me away, because you could have just kept silent, right? You would have been living silently with it, but coming out the way you did to the kinds of judgments, all right, where you were. And you know what, not just in a small town in Iowa, it was everywhere in the country. Then we're talking the 90s. They had just about started with the cocktail stand. That's incredible. So go on, please.
And 2 weeks later, my case managers were meeting with, because I still didn't know, I still hadn't educated myself about HIV. I just knew the minute I found out I was pregnant is when I started actually AZT, and knew that
the worst drug on the face of the earth, by the way. Oh my God, yeah. You are still here. It's
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
it was a very tough time. I was pregnant, my husband was dying, and I started AZT. So it has been the only time since I have been diagnosed with HIV that I actually lost weight. So I didn't gain weight during that pregnancy. But when the case managers went, the administrators didn't even want to shake their hands. And now these are people who are not living with HIV. They work with people living with HIV. And at that point, I got upset and I'm like, listen, do something to me, that's one thing, but do something to somebody that is trying to help me, that's something else. And so I got them to back down, and we sent out the letter, and had set up in the letter an opportunity for parents, if they had any questions, to meet us in 2 weeks. A couple of parents showed up, and that was it, and most of them were in support, luckily. And the reason I was able to do that, Wendy, like you said, with all the stigma and discrimination, is because I am lucky. From the moment that I disclosed my status to my family, they're like, we are here for you, whatever you need. So I was lucky because I never had to worry about losing my family, like so many people still have today. And so I say from that point on, I haven't shut up, which people think it might not agree with, but I started to do education and outreach to schools, to colleges, just because I wanted to try to make the world a better place for my son. Luckily, I lived long enough. I saw him cross the stage and graduate in 2015. I was a mess because I never imagined I'd live long enough to see that. And then in 2018, he escorted me down the aisle for his wedding. And I now have two gorgeous, wonderful grandsons that I am here to love and spoil.
That's great.
Incredible story, Tami, that you're sharing, because those stories actually really impact people. So far, like Stella, you're doing outreach, okay? And we all know a lot of these kids take PrEP, they're having unprotected sex. But when you talk to them, okay, they will listen. Tami, same for you. Your story is so poignant. And when you speak about your story, it will make people listen. Sweeping things under the rug, as we so often do in society. And we now know with certain administrations, they really swept tons of things under the rug and tried to roll back people's rights in many ways, that we will never be able to move forward, and we will never be able to help other people. So thank you. Thank you for taking a stand. Michelle,
Yes.
you are in the hot seat next.
Wow, Tami, I don't think I have ever heard your whole story, and I am just so glad that you are here. And the stories really do say a lot, because when we talk about HIV, a lot of times people think this is something of the past, and it's not. It is still here, and it's still a problem. And the people that say stigma does not exist, well, they're not living with HIV.
Right. Thank you.
And it does still exist, and that is part of the reason that Tami and I are here, and why the outreach still has to happen, because if we don't have conversations around HIV, that's what keeps the stigma alive, is just trying to, like you said, put things under the rug. And I am here just by the grace of God. And I was thinking, Tami, it's like how different our stories are, and they have so many similarities, and it's always incredible. And all right, so my story is a little different. 1998, I end up in the hospital, and I'm a train wreck. They transfer me to another hospital. They can't figure out what is wrong with me. And the doctors are asking, have you ever been tested for HIV? But that wasn't until they already realized they had to transfer me, because I was really going down the tubes fast. And I said, yeah, I was tested long time ago. Well, I did almost die, and I had PCP pneumonia.
Ugh.
And what I didn't tell them, because I didn't even fully know at that time, is I had been already diagnosed in 1988. But at that time, the person I was living with took me to her doctor. Her husband had just passed away. She had 2 young kids. Her doctor told me, "You're not sick, so you don't qualify for AZT." So all I heard was, "You're not sick." And in
And
my
by the way,
mind,
he saved your life telling you didn't qualify for ACT. You know, that was
yes,
a blessing, number one.
yeah, because in '88, that's all we had.
Right.
And I had already watched many of my friends go downhill really fast
Right.
when we did start on AZT, and most of them I don't even know. But long story short, I have like very little memories from that period of my life. I had, from 12 to 19, had a problem with drugs and alcohol. And when I moved back home, I left that other person behind in that other state where everyone thought I had just disappeared. And it took me a really long time. When I moved back home at 19, I went to nursing school on a whim. My mom said she was going to nursing school, and I said, "That sounds great. I'm going too." So I went to nursing school with my mom.
Wow.
And it was kind of cool. Really difficult though, because she swore I never studied. And I'm like, "I just don't study the way you do. I have to have flashcards. That's the only way I can study. I can't just sit there and read a book." It was not easy. Being a nurse, I was not open about my status until about 6 years ago. And sorry, my time is like really off. Long story
Okay,
short,
I am too. It's a pandemic.
yeah, long story short, when I almost died from PCP pneumonia, I went on medication. I responded really fast, and I was like almost immediately undetectable. And when someone's undetectable, they cannot transmit the virus,
Right.
which is a great thing, but they also can become much healthier, which was a great thing because I only had CD4 in like the double digits. I was pretty sick. Took a while to like get back to myself, but I did. But because of the crazy tricks our minds play on us, because I was undetectable, and because I started playing around with my medicines because they had bad side effects. I won't lie. They're also extremely expensive. And
Right.
as a nurse at that time, I could not afford to pay for my medications and my mortgage. And I had to make a choice. I was a single mom.
Wow. Wow.
So I made the choice to cut back on the meds, and I didn't tell my doctor until I went to go get my labs done. I will not recommend this to anyone. For a long time, taking them only 3 days a week, I was still undetectable. And then I decided, well, if I'm still undetectable at 3 days a week, they lied to me because they told me I could never miss a dose. So I fizzled down, and then I stopped taking them. And let me tell you, I felt amazing. And I was sure, I'm a nurse. I will know if I'm going to get sick again.
Right.
I know the symptoms. I'll be fine.
And maybe you even felt you were cured. Maybe you felt you know, undetectable. And you know what? Maybe I'm cured.
It did run through my mind. I mean, there have been some cures. That really wasn't, I really didn't think so. I knew eventually I would probably get sick again, but I really thought that I would know. And because I felt really good off the medicine, because trust me, I did not feel great before. My skin was yellow, my eyes were yellow. When I cut back to 3 days a week, it was better. But those are the old meds. They don't use those meds very much anymore. And the new ones don't have that many side effects. It's so much better. But I did not know that until the day I couldn't breathe. I'm working, and I went to see a client, and I'm walking up the steps of his apartment, and I had to sit down. I couldn't breathe. And then later that night, I ended up in the hospital with PCP pneumonia the second time, because I'm not very smart.
Twice.
So that was when I realized that part of the reason that I stopped taking my meds, part of the reason that I wouldn't like be open about my status, is because of the stigma.
Right.
I was so afraid of anyone that I worked with seeing me walking into an HIV clinic, because I'm a nurse and I know like all the nurses in my area, that was something that was like, it was very scary to me at that time, because working in the hospital, you hear the talk, and you would think that healthcare providers would be up on what HIV is and that it doesn't need judgment. That's what keeps it flourishing. No, that is not what happens. And it was really a battle. But when I started working in an HIV clinic was when I found Positive Women's Network, because I thought that job was going to be where I would be like golden. I would not have to worry about stigma anymore.
No, because you were working as a nurse in an HIV clinic.
Well, oh no. Once that green curtain was lifted, that you can never unsee things again. And it was great in a lot of ways, because through that, and I was able to educate a lot while I was there, which was wonderful. And that was, I knew that was always my purpose. But prior to getting involved with Positive Women's Network, I did not really have a voice. And like, I would hear talk and I wouldn't say anything. And I didn't know how to respond when you would hear stigmatizing talk around you. And it was like, it was very stressful. So I reached out to Positive Women's Network because I'm like, I know I am not alone. But as a nurse, I seriously felt alone. I then found later, after finding Positive Women's Network, there's also the Association of Nurses in AIDS Care, which was founded way early in the epidemic, when hospitals did not want people with HIV in there. And at that time, we only knew it was AIDS. They didn't even want them in the hospital. So this was an association of nurses who could be supported, because after working in an AIDS ward, many nurses were, like Tami said, like they were being stigmatized themselves just because they worked there. And stigma is just, it's so much still alive. And honestly, stigma is what kills people today from HIV.
No, I mean, your point is well taken.
Still, the suicide, still in this community and in New York City, you see these young kids that are giving up.
Yeah, and it's unnecessary, and it's absolutely detrimental to ending the epidemic. And the way around, like, stigma will always exist, because we do this with, you know, other things, substance use disorder, mental health challenges. Stigma is a way for some people to say, I'm up here and you're down here.
Right.
And
I'm better. I don't have what you have. You're absolutely right.
Until it hits home.
It is interesting, though, listening to all three of you, because I got involved when it was GRID. We were part of an organization that took care of the pets of anyone that had HIV or AIDS. And back in those days, and Stella, you remember well, the stigma was terrible. You lost your job, you lost your family, you could lose your partner, and forget about all the legal things that would happen to you. You would pass, and the parents would come in and take everything and look at the partner like that was an invisible person. All right. So then the classifications of drugs came out, right? And that was in the 90s. And I watched my friends that had taken the Dallas Bayer drugs, but, you know, the off-label stuff. And you mentioned, Stella, that lesbian doctor. I know who she was.
And her sister.
Joseph Sonnabend, I happen to know. He happened to also be my doctor, and he was completely off-label. That man saved, and Sean Struve knows him, that man saved so many lives. And living here in New York, I was watching people that were taking all this off-label stuff, because everyone who I know who took AZT, including in our organization, they died. It was like a death. I don't know anyone that survived AZT unless they tried it, got so sick in the first 2 weeks that they didn't take it.
Well, this was Robert Mapplethorpe's doctor.
Right.
Who this lady was, right? So she was extremely big in the community.
Right.
And everyone revered her, including Larry Kramer.
Right.
To say anything bad about her. And not that she did anything bad. She was trying to advocate. She really was. But then she had no time. She was opening a gym. She was doing this. She was doing that. She had no time for the small person, for the little kid that out of all those kids didn't make it in that drug trial.
Right.
And just ended up withering and dying. The other people didn't. And they're
Right.
all rich and white, of course. Which is the other thing about ACT UP, Wendy. You know this. It was started by rich, white, positive men.
Exactly. And we're talking about how HIV is
silly and said, listen, you guys, stop this sexist talk, stop this whatever. And we're here and we're helping you. So get with the program.
And Stella, you brought up a good point. When you talk about HIV now in the Black and brown communities and the fact that it is very prevalent.
41% in New York City
right.
of cases are people of color, and they only represent 14% of the HIV.
And the drugs are expensive. You put all that together.
To Michelle too. When I started PrEP, because I'm still going at it at my age. Okay.
Good for you, Stella.
It's great.
I could not get it because I could not afford it. Right. And here I am with networks, and I know the people at Columbia, and I'm still doing the shows, though I'm not on the board anymore of the New York Blood Center. And I couldn't get it for $5,000 for 3 months of PrEP. And so I go to the little, tabling things. And so I went to this one table that was in the Bronx, and he gave me this card. Call these people. It was called Patient Advocacy Foundation, PAF. Very important. If you can get this down on the chat or something. It initially was for people who are dying, mostly cancer and people like that, right? And they were paying for drugs where you couldn't afford it.
A lot of money, right?
Which is great. Well, under HIV, because of what had happened with HIV, they had a prevention model. And so they let us, they put PrEP under there.
That's great.
So finally, I could get that for free, and you would get my Medicare, because I'm that old, Medicare statement, $5,000, you pay zero, Great, right? But now, because of the pandemic and that I got pandemic insurance, even though I was a freelancer at my other job, right? My income shot up for the last 2 years. So I'm no longer on Epic. I'm no longer on Extra Help. Now I have to pay $95 a month for PrEP.
You know what, Stella? That's a bargain considering.
Depending on again, it's all the levels of people. Right. And I bump into a lot of different levels of people at the bars. The rich guys, the poor guys, the waiters. And one other thing I did want to stress, drag has really evolved, not just on RuPaul's Drag Race.
Yeah.
I see it right here in the community. When I was doing Therapy Bar, I had to go into this closet to change. There were strippers, there were comedians, there were singers, and a few drag queens, right? And then it was all drag queens. And now I don't know who is whom. I mean, I'm next to women. I don't know how to address them. I thought this one woman was a woman being a drag king, when indeed it was a trans woman, and she didn't come out until she came out on stage and said it, And then there are women who are doing drag.
Right.
And I didn't even ask them how they identified. I don't care. I love them. They're great. 2 of them are doing the trials. They think it's important. One is a Mexican girl who's really wonderful, Lori Lou. And they've reached out because they know it's not just for gay men anymore.
Right. Well, you just brought up it. You know what? All along, it wasn't just for gay men. And I think, I love having 2 women on the show talking about this, because back in the 80s, one of our clients was a woman. Her name was Phyllis, and she was in and out of the hospital. I recently ran into someone, and I talked about Powers, Pet Owners with AIDS Resource Service. And they said, I have a friend, a woman who used to work with them. I'm like, really? I knew everybody there. Her name was Phyllis. I'm like, Phyllis is still alive. So that was huge to me. We have to take away the stigma for HIV. It's every gender. It's every color. All right. But we need to get that education out there. And, amongst our group tonight, we're all talking to the converted here. How do you think, and I want you all to chime in on this. What do you think is the best way to reach the younger generations, the kids in the depressed neighborhoods? How do you think we should go about doing this? Because HIV still is a very real thing. And let me tell you, 3/4 of the population just thinks they don't think it's cured. They just think, this is the words we use. Oh, it's manageable. And once you put that out there, everyone just thinks, oh, it's like diabetes, it's manageable. You know, you have your insulin. What do you think?
You mind if I take this, Tami?
Yeah.
Go.
Please.
All right. Well, that right there, manageable like diabetes. Diabetes is manageable until you lose a foot.
Right. Thank you.
It manageable does not mean without problems. And PrEP is an absolute great resource when people know about it and when they can access it.
Yes.
So access to the services, access to the education, doing these shows like this is a great way to reach people who may not walk into a clinic, but they may be on Facebook or on the internet. And I believe having more people to show, you know, just everyday people living with HIV, thriving.
Of which there are many, by the way, of which there are many. And yeah, to your point, it's not sackcloth and ashes. They're thriving and just living their lives. And that's important. It's that positive image, getting that out there. Thank you for saying that.
Oh, you're welcome.
And if I could bring in just, you know, one thing that is also preventing, we have the knowledge now to, although I hate this phrase, end the epidemic, but to prevent any new transmissions between PrEP and PEP, and if we could get everyone who is living and diagnosed with HIV on medication, we could end the epidemic, or at least new diagnoses. I hate ending the epidemic because to me that means I have to die. You know, everyone living with HIV has to die before you can end the epidemic. But end any new diagnoses. However, there are so many barriers to getting to that point. We could end the epidemic in a perfect world. We don't live in a perfect world. And one of the things that Michelle and I work on is HIV criminalization laws, and what we do at the Sero Project. And over 30 states have HIV-specific laws that criminalizes our health condition. Iowa, we were able to modernize our law in 2014. We had one of the most punitive laws in the nation. Ours was, if you could not prove that you disclosed your status to your partner, everyone was sentenced to 25 years in jail, felony conviction, and had to register as a sex offender.
Right.
So the law in Iowa was, Iowans living with HIV were being manipulated and coerced into staying into bad and abusive relationships, both men and women.
Because they were terrified to say anything.
Well, because their partners would say, if you break up with me, or there was a woman whose partner was very abusive, and he would continue to say, if you call the police while I am abusing you, I will tell them that you had not disclosed your status, and you will be the one who will go to jail, which ended up happening to her. She didn't call the police. Her neighbors did. And 2 weeks later, police came and arrested her. And she pled guilty, unfortunately, what most people do, because how do you prove disclosure?
Well, that's the whole thing. You can't prove. Anyone can point a finger at anyone and say they didn't tell me, they set me up. So
exactly,
so she ended up going to jail.
And she didn't go to jail because she pled guilty. However, what the prosecutor and her lawyer didn't tell her is that with that guilty plea, she had to register as a sex offender, and all of the damage that comes with this. So this is a woman who had consensual sex with another adult who is on the sex offender registry. That is how, and there are still 6 states in the United States that if you are living with HIV, and you are charged and convicted or get talked into pleading guilty, you are on the sex offender registry, which impacts their life. There is a woman, the rest of your life. There's a woman in Tennessee who was just arrested in a sting operation for sex workers, who she has substance abuse issues and wants treatment and has sought treatment, but she cannot go to a treatment facility because she is on their sex offender registry.
Oh my gosh.
So the only option she has, I mean, her mother is so desperately, and she just got connected with the Tennessee HIV modernization movement, but her mother is just livid, going, she wants help, but there is no help. So the only choice she has, if and when she gets out of jail, is to go back to survival sex work, because the sex offender registry is so suffocating that you can't find a place to live. There's a woman who's been on the Tennessee sex offender registry going on 16 years. She just had a beautiful baby girl who just turned 1 year old. She will not be able to take her child to school. She will not be able to go to parent-teacher conferences.
She's a registered sex offender because of this. Wow.
Because her boyfriend, after they broke up, turned her in and said that she had not disclosed her status. So these laws that Michelle and I are fighting so hard to modernize, repeal, are so devastating, and is a barrier to, we will never end the HIV epidemic as long as people living with HIV can be charged as felons and then have to register as a sex offender. So it's so important that, one, we need the support of all of your listeners. And I just proud to say that real quick, Sero just celebrated the inaugural HIV is Not a Crime Awareness Day on February 28th. And we have a link for anyone who wants to watch the incredible webinar that really to raise public awareness through the community education. And Quinn Tivey, who is one of Elizabeth Taylor's grandchildren, was on that webinar, joined us to share this year. So the Awareness Day is on February 28th. And that date is significant because it ties in like a symbolic bow around the closing of National Black History Month and the beginning of National Women's History Month, two demographics that are disproportionately impacted by both the HIV epidemic and HIV criminalization. It was also honors the birthday of Elizabeth Taylor, and if she was still here with us today, she would be 90 years old. So we partnered with them, and they were amazing partners, and were able to get HIV criminalization into an audience that we have a problem getting to. HIV criminalization and HIV is Not a Crime Awareness Day was announced on The View. Whoopi Goldberg talked about it. So to bring the awareness to a wider audience is one of the things that this Awareness Day does. The Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation also created a public service announcement that link will be put in the chat box. And one of their ambassadors, Paris Jackson, spoke as well on HIV criminalization and why these laws need to be modernized and reformed, and how draconian and oppressive they are for people, and dangerous for people. And dangerous.
Tami, you really hit on something here, and you gave me a segue to where I was going to go next. 3/4 of the brilliant people that I know, or that Stella knows, or that any of you know, well, in your case, the ones you know would know. But here, if I brought this up to someone, and what you just talked about, that a person can be put down as a registered sex offender, people would not know this.
Right. In New York, Wendy, you and I.
Right. And everybody knows everything here. Believe me, they don't know this. All right. And yes, that's why I do a show like this. However, in my heart of hearts, what I personally feel about many things, celebrity can really be the big game changer. What you just told us about the HIV criminalization day and having Paris Jackson there and people that were affiliated with Liz Taylor, to me, yes, we have to get legislature changed. But the two of you know how hard that is. it's like, it's so hard. We know it needs to happen. I really have become a person that believes, having lived through the whole entire AIDS epidemic, and I watched what Liz Taylor was able to do in terms of raising awareness, raising money, that at the end of the day, celebrities can make a huge difference, because unfortunately, that is the kind of society that we live in. And they can get the news that you want to get out into the world. They will get it out into the world.
But that doesn't mean we can't stop doing from the bottom.
Oh, Stella, I totally
Oh,
agree.
yeah, from all angles.
Right, Michelle. Every angle, Stella. What you said. If you get one person to take one part,
right, exactly.
I've learned.
I want to mention about
Yeah.
the jobs that I mentioned, the green room, and just read this part about Bill. So his current work is concerned with criminal justice and opposing harsh punishments such as the sex offense registry, a 21st century blacklist with 900,000 Americans on it by one count. He publishes the Dobbs Wire, DOBBS Wire, which circulates sex offense law and policy news.
Wow.
There's another resource for that.
It's another big resource. Can we have that in our chat? I can't see it, so because you're right.
Because I know Bill, so I just
that is another really important resource. So, I mean, we have to get our resources out there, have to get legislation passed, but really have to get recognition, eyes upon the issue,
and talk about HIV. No one.
Thank you. Let's talk. Right, exactly.
They don't talk about it. I did want to mention one thing to you ladies, which is a friend of mine. Do you all know Maggie Neep?
No, tell me who that is.
Maggie Neep wrote a book, Now Everyone Will Know. She went 25 years without telling, without disclosing that her husband died of AIDS.
Right.
Because of her children. She was negative, and her children were negative, even though they had sex, right? But she went, he was with the Wall Street Journal, he was a big guy, and all of this happened, of course, in the 80s. So she wrote this book, and the subtitle is The Perfect Husband, His Shameless Secret, My Rediscovered Life, and how she's now an advocate. And it's a wonderful book, Maggie Neep, K-N-I-E-P, Maggie Neep. And I know her from the Research Foundation to Cure AIDS. I met her there. There's all different ways you can network. And one thing I did want to mention, when I go around giving my cards out, I give them out, and they assume that I'm assuming they're negative. And I get the kid that goes, well, it's not for me because I'm positive. And then I go, well, I just happen to have.
Yeah, good for you.
We do have studies and we give money for HIV positive guys as well. We have no studies yet, really, no vaccines to cure HIV positive people. Of course not. We don't have any vaccine, but there are studies to help. And we do have them. So we do not ignore the HIV positive people. We do not ignore trans people of color. And 56% only of gay men are on PrEP here in New York, by the way. What about the other 44%? And
that's exactly what I was going to say to you.
Who disclosed a flag out in front in the bathhouse in the room? I'm on PrEP. No.
Right.
Yeah, and that is absolutely one of the things that awareness can help. People can't be on PrEP if they don't know about it.
Right.
They can't stay on PrEP if they can't access it.
Right, if they can't.
And people with HIV can't get care and stay in care, get undetectable when they're on medication if they can't access care without stigma. Right. And it's very hard to access care after you have been criminalized on an HIV charge. I'm so happy that you are doing this work because education is the thing. So many people don't know that HIV criminalization exists. Even people who are working in healthcare, people at the Department of Health. So what we do is get the education out. I believe that every person who is living with HIV needs to know about this because there are ways that they can protect themselves. Of course, there is no guarantees, but at least reduce the risk that you could become criminalized. Right. But the worst part about these laws is that many people don't know they exist until they are used against them. and you can be charged with a crime that you didn't even know was a crime. Like, where does this happen? Like,
Right.
murder, yes, you know that's a crime.
Right. If you did murder, you know murder. But this is like, you're like a sitting duck because anyone can point a finger at you. And Tami, I did not know. And I had Sean from the Sero Project on, and I've talked with Cindy Stein, but I didn't know and learned tonight what I learned from you, that they become a registered sex offender. Like, there's a map, and you all know it online. You can put someone's name in. You can put in the place where you live, not someone's name, and it'll pop up if there's registered sex offenders around you. My God, the fact that they can take a totally innocent person and turn them into a sex offender is just absolutely horrific. All right, here's a question, a political question. What is our current administration? Are they doing anything about this?
I could take this one.
Yeah, okay. You
Mind?
go for it, girl.
Sorry. I do just want to say, in Pennsylvania here, Pennsylvania is quite different than Iowa, and I am so glad that you modernized your laws. Pennsylvania has a couple laws. They basically target people who are doing sex work and also people who are already incarcerated or have a run-in with law enforcement. But that is actually worse than having the other kind of laws, because there's no way to get rid of the other laws that they throw into charging someone who has HIV when they're charged with anything else, or someone just saying they never disclosed. So then they get charged with aggravated assault and attempted murder.
Oh my God. I mean,
so we can't get those off the books because they're used in other ways. But the way that we're going about it now, and the administration, to answer your question, yes, the administration did speak on World AIDS Day about knowing that when HIV criminalization is still occurring, this is not the way to get to zero new transmissions.
Right.
This is the way that people who know about the criminalization laws are afraid to get tested.
Right.
They're afraid to disclose because it could then be used against them.
It'll completely ruin their life. But okay, you're saying on AIDS Awareness Day, this was, called out, brought up, or whatever. Is there a task force? It has to come from up above. What is actively being done? You're talking in each state, right? And I know about Pennsylvania. I didn't know about Iowa. And there's all those other states like Tennessee. Is no one going after these laws in those places?
There has been a bill that has been proposed repeatedly, and it's called Repeal. Help me out, Tami. I forget what
the Repeal Act. It was introduced by Representative Barbara Lee. And just to say, so we are working with the administration. The administration is talking with networks of people living with HIV to see how the federal government can help to address these laws, but unfortunately they are state laws. So this has to be done state by state.
It does.
So in 2001, we were really lucky. We had some really strong movement. Illinois became the second state in the nation to fully repeal their law. Missouri, Virginia, and Nevada were able to modernize their laws. But a lot of the states that are left are in the Deep South.
Yeah, you don't need to say anything more than that. I'm sorry to say, but
yeah,
unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. Well, our time is up. I can't believe it. I need to do 2 more shows about this because there's a whole lot of things. I'm going to go around real quick. One closing statement from each person. Stella.
Okay. Even though we're looking for a cure and we're trying to do Vaccinalicious, managing the community is very profitable for the drug companies. They make money off of us.
Yeah, there you go.
So why would they want a cure? So it's a little hard for me to even do Vaccinalicious every year to find a cure when they really don't want it.
Right.
Research Foundation to Cure AIDS is trying to go around that. Can be checked now. But we've got to keep our eye on the prize and talk to everybody that we can, as I do from the bottom up. Men, women, non-binary. I still get confused when I talk to people. And go that way. If I can't talk to the big crowd, which I do once a year with Vaccinalicious, I'll still be there at Barracuda every Thursday night, trying to beat the kids every week. Hosted by Keisha Carr, and then I guest other places.
Love what you
I
do.
get the word out.
Thank you, Tami.
So the Sero Project, along with our partner organizations, just announced the venue and logistics and the date for our next HIV is Not a Crime National Training Academy, which will be held June 4th through 7th at Emory and Henry College in Emory, Virginia. So to find out more information about how you can get involved, how you could attend HINAC, go to our website, seroproject.com. I'm sorry, www.seroproject.com.
And Tami, if you can send us the information on our TriVersity website or on Facebook so that we can post it, right? We all want to get as much word out as we possibly can. That would be great. Michelle.
Yes, and if you are in Pennsylvania and you would like information about the Pennsylvania HIV Justice Network, who works along with Sero and going out and getting this education out to the people who need to hear it, the people who are able to make those policy decisions, making sure that they're aware of the issue. The Pennsylvania HIV Justice Network link should go in the oh, you got it. Thank you. And also Positive Women's Network. Pennsylvania is hiring. So if anyone is looking for a great job with amazing women and help to make sure that everyone knows their right to vote, knows where to go, how to get registered, make sure they're still registered, and help us make calls to make sure everyone remembers that it's election day, those links can be posted as well. And if you are someone who is looking to tap into your higher purpose, you can, my link, I am also the founder of Awake Alive Abundant Coaching, where I help people to tap into their higher purpose so they can live their lives with confidence and with greater health and more success in their relationships and their careers. And that link is there as well. And you can get a free clarity call with me if you are not sure what your higher purpose is, or if you're already working on your purpose, but you keep stopping yourself. Those are my specialties.
Love it. I can't thank you all enough for being on this show tonight. And let's keep doing what we're all doing. Get the word out there.
Thank you.
As you said, Stella, it's one person at a time.
Right.